Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take a moment for silent reflection. Thank you. Yeah, move on to item number C, approval of agenda with the following amendments. Additional classified personnel actions for consideration, item E3.
Mr. President, I move we approve the agenda as amended.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your left hand. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Move on to item D, delegation of public comments. Okay. Item E, the consent agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. D1, Garden City High School Buffalo Athletic Hall of Fame. Mr. Drew Tone.
A couple weeks ago, we had our 6th annual Buffalo Athletic Hall of Fame. Quite a few of you are new board members since we started the Hall of Fame, and I kind of talked to Robin a little bit about it. But I wanted to give you guys, as a group, some background on the Hall of Fame. About 9 years ago, prior to COVID, when I first became the athletic director of Garden City High School, we had some people in the community come and reach out to us and had kind of talked about an athletic Hall of Fame. We'd always had the Garden City High School Hall of Fame, but a lot of bigger school districts, you'll see an athletic specific Hall of Fame. So Stuart Nelson reached out to us, and him and I kind of have a long relationship and have talked. I've known Stuart since I went to college out here, so we talked about it and kind of milled things back and forth, and eventually we ended up putting together the Garden City Buffalo Athletic Hall of Fame with the idea of a way to honor athletes here at Garden City High School and, give them recognition that you wouldn't traditionally see at the Garden City High School Hall of Fame. It's kind of, some of the people are similar people, but it's kind of a different group. This past, earlier in October, we were able to welcome our new class, which included groups such as the 99 state wrestling team, Joey Tuttle, which is an outstanding female athlete, track star for us, Clinton Keller, an outstanding coach. So we've been able to bring in quite a few people, bring them back to the community. It's been received well by our community, and especially well by these families and these former athletes. But I just wanted to get up here. I know a lot of you guys weren't a part of it when it was approved, almost 8 years ago. So just wanted to answer any questions that you guys might have with regards to the Buffalo Athletic Hall of Fame. No question? Yeah.
I have a question this year. Typically that we move that to when the homecoming game is that correct? Was it different this year?
Yeah, it kind of got moved off of homecoming because they thought too many events were kind of piled onto one game.
So it would be awful.
Yeah, they're thinking of keeping it off homecoming, so it's not really competing with homecoming. There were a lot of reunions on the homecoming weekend, and so people were going to have to choose between going to their homecoming reunion, a class reunion, or going to our Hall of Fame dinner that night. So we've kind of, Matt and those guys opted to move it off of homecoming for that reason, so they didn't have to make that choice.
Is the selection process similar to?
Yeah, so the selection process, we've got a panel of former Buffalo athletes that are on the committee. on the selection committee. You have to get 2/3 vote to get on, to get into the Hall of Fame. There's a nomination process where you fill out a nomination form. In all honesty, a lot of the nominees have been internal nominees. We have John Ford that helps us, and John Ford can date back to the 80s. He came on with us back in 83 as a coach. And then anything before that on our committee, we do have people like Stuart Nelson. We've got Dan Fankhauser. So we've got guys that kind of go back into the 60s that remember things from the 50s. And then Brett Marshall, what he does once all the names come in, Brett Marshall will go and compile all the statistics. He does a really good job of going through the archives at the Telegram and compiling all the statistics and all the awards that any of these individuals have accomplished. And we bring those along and kind of put together a spreadsheet and a voting page. And then the 9-member committee votes, and you have to get a 2/3. You have to get 2/3 to be approved onto the whole thing. Some years we do have caps. Some years we get to our cap. Some years we don't get to our cap, just based off who's been nominated and who's come through those years. It's been a wide range of groups. We have almost as many females as we do males in the individual categories. We've, this year, Quentin Hope, he was our first state champion in track and field. He was an absolute stud. Him and his brother Ralph Hope were both nominated and selected into what we call our legends category. We're trying to find a way of bringing in these old timers that may not have a lot of people around, but we still want to be able to acknowledge them. So we created this legends category for people like the 1920 football team. That was our first undefeated football team that we had here in Garden City. So we were able to bring, groups like that in. And surprisingly, we always have individuals. Obviously, we don't have anybody from the 1920 football team, but we had sons and daughters or grandsons and granddaughters come to the event. The event this year, we had 112 people come to the event. So we try to keep it. It's very expensive to put on. It's all privately funded. It is connected to Garden City High School, but all the funds are privately raised, so it's not costing taxpayers or the district any money to do this. So it is done through the high school, but it's all privately raised money. So when you go to host an event like that, individual tickets, those things can get a little expensive the more people you have, just because I think we paid $48 per meal, even though we had the beef donated and the chicken donated. It's still a pretty expensive event to host something like that at Southwind.
What is the cap, Drew?
We try to keep it around 100 to 120.
As far as the number of folks?
I believe it's 5 individuals, 1 coach, 1 team, and then one team in the legends category, 1 coach in the legends category, and up to 5 individuals in the legends category. So it kind of depends on the individuals. We always have a coach that gets nominated. We always have teams that get nominated. We don't necessarily always get 5 individuals nominated in the legends category. We've got a list of 100 up-to-date individuals. You are restricted. You have to have been graduated for at least 10 years, or you have to be retired for at least 5 years as a coach. So.
My son had a friend come back for it, so I had reached out to Drew. I was like, because what they were telling me, I was like, I think I would know about that. It was associated with the school district, but I don't know anything about it. So that's why I was asking Drew about it. But they had a really good time.
Yeah, it's been good. When we get our teams back, especially, this year with the wrestling teams, and, we had the state championship football team, and we had the 66 basketball team. That was really special. So anytime we can get those groups back together, like this year with the wrestling team, they haven't been back together as a group since they graduated 20 years ago. And so this is the first time as a group they've been able to get back together. And with Rocky passing a couple of years ago. We were able to get Rocky out here prior to his passing for one of the Hall of Fame dinners, which was super special for those guys because not too long after he passed away. So those types of things are special, and it's been a special event. We don't make it too big, but it's been special, and those people are really thankful to be a part of it and really thankful that we have something like that. There's not a ton of schools that have something like that because most often you tie it into the high school Hall of Fame. Our high school Hall of Fame is just a little bit different than most because we only allow 2 in a year, one out of Garden City person and one in-town person. So it's that Hall of Fame is pretty exclusive. So this is a little bit broader that allows more. Keller Leopold, Iron Insurance, formerly Keller Leopold. They're our big major sponsor that they pay for almost everything with this event. Doug and Eric Keller, Keller Leopold has been around forever in Garden City, and Doug and Eric are huge supporters of Garden City athletics, and they're kind of the ones that make this whole thing go. The same, we have a Buffalo Senior Athlete of the Year. Doug and Eric personally paid for all of that Senior Athlete of the Year, and they raise funds to help with the scholarship program that we have in conjunction with that Male and Female Senior Athlete of the Year. And that Male and Female Senior Athlete of the Year has been going on since the 50s. So it's got a long legacy attached to it. Robin reached out and I said, just nothing too formal, but I would update you guys. And if you guys ever have questions or hopefully next year we'll be better at getting information to you so you guys can go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
Okay, we'll move on to item E, the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your left hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay. Item F, board reports. F1, the fall learning report. Heather Steckman. Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Okay, I will oh no, I already switched. I will preface this a little bit that we did have some changes on some of the final slides. We had transposed some numbers or made some sort of error. I will summarize that when we get there. But just know that there might be some slight differences on those final 3 to 4 slides when we get there. Okay? Okay, so this is our spring 24 CAP data report. So the state assessments that students take in the spring, this is a summary of their performance for that spring assessment. As we go through this, we're going to start off by talking about the fact that these are assessments that are given in grades 3 through 8 every year for English and math. And in high school, they take them once for English and math. Science, on the other hand, assesses on 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. So you won't necessarily see science data every year, okay? Then we'll get into just some summary of the data comparing 2023 to 2024 data to look at how students have either increased or decreased in their scores. And then we'll open it up if you have any questions. Just to begin, CAP performance indicators, level 1 is the lowest indicator. It indicates that kids have a limited ability to understand the grade level material. Level 2 is technically a passing score. It means kids have a basic ability to understand grade level content. Levels 3 and 4 are higher achieving. They're either effective or excellent, but they indicate that kids are going to have a higher probability of having post-secondary success, the higher that they achieve. So although level 2 is considered a passing score on the state assessment, the state talks to us about trying to get those level 3 and level 4 numbers higher, because there's a significant difference in kids' ability to be successful after high school if they are scoring in the 3 and 4 range when they're in school. Putting some numbers to it, level 1 students who are performing at level 1 while they're in school have a 30% chance of being successful after high school. If they're performing at the level 2 range, that goes up to 55%. When they get to level 3, that gets to 75%. And level 4, they have an 80% probability of having post-secondary success as defined by the state. So they also, the state also talks a lot about how do we get those level 1s down, because we know they are not likely to be successful when we get out of school. For ELA, we've seen a decline in our data for 3rd grade ELA this year. We also summarized our data by comparing Dodge City and Liberal, because they are area schools with similar demographics and similar size, to the state. So the blue bar there is the state average, red is us, yellow is Dodge City, green is Liberal. We want to have the bars be lower on the left-hand side in that level 1. We want them to be higher on the right-hand side. So when comparing to the state as well as area schools with similar size and demographics, we are below where we really want to be in regards to the state, but we are exceeding the area schools in our similar size demographic.
Okay, we also saw a decline in math in 3rd grade. If you'll notice, the level 4 stay the same, but the 3s went down 7%, and our 1s went up 8%. So going down in 3 and up in 1 is definitely not what we want to be doing. Okay. Go ahead. If you look at the comparison, like Heather said, we do better than Dodge and Liberal, and I went through and kind of added our 3s and 4s and the state's 3s and 4s, because there's a trend in math that really bothers me, and I'll talk about it as we go on. But in 3rd grade, the state's 3s and 4s added to 50. We added to 35. So we were 15 below the state. But we were 10 above Dodge. They were at 25 and 5 above Liberal. Okay, so 3rd grade math wasn't like where we wanted, but I'll talk a little bit about a trend that happens even all across the state.
4th grade, again, we saw a shift from both 3s and 4s to level 1s and 2s here. But when we look at our 4th grade data compared to the state, we are very consistent with the state in level 1s. We're exceeding them in level 2s by quite a bit, and then a little below on levels 3 and 4. But I was feeling pretty good about the fact that our level 1s are getting right at that state average. So those, we definitely still want to see that trend down, but we're getting closer to the state average on those lower performing students.
4th grade is really the only area in math where we did see an improvement. So our 3s and 4s went up 2%, and our level 1s went down, looks like just 1%. And then something that, this trend that I was talking about, the state went down 13% from 3rd to 4th grade, and we went down 11%. So we didn't decrease as much as the state did from 3rd grade to 4th grade in 3s and 4s added together. Go ahead.
For 5th grade, we were pretty consistent for the last 3 years, have not seen any real significant changes in our data in those 3 years. And when we compare to the state and area schools, we're definitely exceeding the state on our level 1s, but almost exactly the same on level 2s, and then some little differences in 3s and 4s. But probably our most concerning there is the number of level 1s that we have.
Okay, and math, we increased our level 3s 2%, but yeah, I mean, obviously you can see there's a level 1 of 50%. That's just way too high. We really want to get that down. And the trend with the state, sorry, that's okay. Their level 3s and 4s went down another 5%, and we went down 7%. So the trend that bothers me is that we're not so bad in 3rd grade, but in math, as we go all the way through, we decline bad. And so, but the state does too. And so we've got to answer the question, why, what is the reason? Why is that happening? In science, we outperform everyone in this, and we actually have fairly good data compared to the other districts, and you could see that we improved.
Want to be this one?
That's fine. We did improve in both the 3s and the 4s quite a bit. We went up. No, I can't read my notes. To 6% in science from one year to the next, and that's more than we had in any other place in our data. Go ahead. And you can see that in science, we outperform everyone else a lot, especially in the 3s and the 4s. Not the state, but Dodge and Liberal for sure in science.
I think we were looking closely at this data because this is the first year of assessments since we took science teachers and put them back in core classrooms and filled those science positions with long-term subs. So we didn't see a huge decrease in our data after that move. I mean, our kids are doing well with it. Our teachers are doing well with it. For our 6th grade CAP data, we tended to move kids from level 2, and they either moved up to 3, 4, or they moved down to level 1. But where we saw the shrink was in that level 2 this time. And then we moved closer to state averages in levels 2, 3, and 4, but we're still pretty disproportionate in level 1.
Okay, and in math, we saw just a 1% increase in the 3s, but we saw a big increase in our 1s. So our 2s they went this way. We had a few go up and a few go down. And then in the longitudinal data or the comparisons from year to year, the state went down another 3% in math, but we went up 2% from 5th to 6th grade. And that's unusual to go up.
For 7th grade, we consistently have too many level 1s here. And our 3s and 4s have remained consistent for the last couple of years. And when we do the side-by-side comparison, we're disproportionate from the state at level 1 and level 3. Levels 2 and 4 were pretty consistent with them.
Okay, once we get to middle school math and high school math, it's just atrocious. And it's atrocious across the state, like I've said. But this is the area where Dodge catches us and starts to outperform us. So they're even with us on they're even with us on, if you add the 3s and the 4s together, we both have 13%. And the state went down 1% and we went down 6% in this grade. Go ahead.
For our 8th grade, our data is trending down here. Seeing an increase in level 1s. And again, we're disproportionate at levels 1 and 3, but pretty consistent at levels 2 and 4 with the state averages.
In math, you can see the level 1s just continue to climb, and level 3s and 4s continue to decrease. The state did go down 5%, and we went down 3%. So we decreased less than state, but our 7th grade data was not good. So we need to figure out how we're gonna get the middle school and high school kids to have vast improvements. In science, we lost a little bit in our threes there, but we're fairly consistent the last 2 years. You can see since COVID. Go into the comparison. But we're still outperforming Dodge and Liberal in our threes and fours if you add them together. We're not that far off of the state, a little, but not as bad as some of our other data is sometimes.
For 10th grade, we're moving kids from threes and fours into level ones here. And again, we're pretty disproportionate in our level ones from the state average, closer at the twos and the fours.
This is just really discouraging. As a former math teacher, this is really discouraging to me. And I feel like we're all the way back here to 16, 17 with our data where we were starting to get better. And then we knew it, we were gonna have a situation for a couple of years, but it's continuing. The state decreased, go ahead and go to the next slide. From 8th grade to 10th grade, the state actually, oh wait, that's science, sorry. The state decreased another 3% and we decreased another 4%. Okay, and then science is in 11th grade instead of 10th grade. And our science numbers are not as bad as our math numbers, which sometimes that's a little strange for me because you have to have math to do science, right? But it's the reading part. Because our reading isn't quite as bad as our math, then I think they're still having some success on the science assessment. And then we're just pretty even with the other schools that we're similar to, and the state outperforms all three of us.
So this is the page where there's some differences between what you guys received and what we have today. I think some numbers got put in on the ELA side instead of the math side, so we had to correct some errors this morning. So this basically summarizes what happened at each grade level. If it's red, then we did not make a positive trend. If it's green, then we're trending in the positive direction. So for 3rd grade, comparing from the previous 3rd graders to 3rd graders in spring of 24, we increased our level ones by 8% and we decreased our level threes and fours by 5%. At the 4th grade level, we decreased our level ones by 2% and decreased our level threes and fours by 4%. At 5th grade, stayed the same on level 1. We increased our threes and fours by 1%. 6th grade, we increased our level ones and increased our levels 3 and 4s. And then we had kind of a negative trend in 7th, 8th, and 10th grades there summarized. And when I see this, I get really discouraged because we have put so much work and we're seeing teachers do so much work and we're just not seeing it in the data. But when you start looking at building level data and classroom level data, we have some really great bright spots. In 3rd grade at Buffalo Jones, we saw a 20% decrease in level ones and an increase of 1% in threes and fours. Whereas in math, they decreased their level ones by 12% and increased their threes and fours by 6%. So had some really good success at Buffalo Jones in 3rd grade. In 4th grade, we have several buildings that had strong growth. Edith Sharman saw a 22% increase in their threes and fours, but their level ones went down 15%. Similarly, Georgia Matthews, 20% increase in threes and fours, and our level ones went down by 15% at Georgia Matthews in 4th grade. Gertrude Walker at 4th grade saw a 15% increase in threes and fours, and 5th grade at Plymouth saw an 18% increase in threes and fours. So we have pockets where we're seeing some really good success. We've just got to get that replicated across the district in every classroom.
There were, in most grades, you can see significant increases in level ones, but we did have a few grades where we increased our 3s and 4s. And so that's really what we need to focus on is our 3s and 4s, our instruction to help make that happen. And then in science, it's kind of half and half. We had some good areas. So a 6% increase in levels 3s and 4s is really good. We want to try to get to 10%. So we're getting closer to that. But this 7% increase wasn't good.
So our KISA goals are shaped around increasing the number of 3s and 4s, or students that are performing at level 3 and 4. So we track this, and by 2027, our goal is that 30% of students in ELA will be performing at a level 3 or 4. Last year, we were at 23.08%. This year, we were at 21.5%. So we showed a decrease on the ELA side. Similarly, on math, we went from a 19 to a 17, and our goal is to get to 25% by 2027. Things that we're doing, and through January, we're going to continue to work with TNTP to build that instructional leadership piece. This year, we've been working on Get Better Faster, the Get Better Faster model, which is a book by Paul Bambrick, to give our instructional leaders a tool to then give their teachers steps, action steps to improve their instruction. We're working to kind of differentiate the action steps that every teacher's getting, so it's not as blanketed as what we were doing when we had so much focus on WIGs and those lead measures. This is a little bit more targeted to what every individual teacher needs. We're continuing with letters training. We will have over 200 teachers that will have completed letters training at the end of this school year. And then this is our second year of implementation with UFly. So we really spent a semester last year with teachers getting comfortable with the program. So we're hopeful we're going to see a little bit more improvement from kids in some of their fast data for sure. And hopefully we'll start seeing some of that carry over into CAP data. We're continuing to work on behavior supports because we know behavior and the expulsions and long-term suspensions that we have absolutely have an impact on student success. So we're continuing to work on some of those strategies. And then in general, the work that we've done in the last 3 years that we've been in this office was really highlighted as we've been going out into other districts to get a view of curriculums, because we're getting ready for ELA curriculum adoption, or going to view curriculum being implemented in some area-wide districts. And what's blaringly obvious when we go into these places is how different our instructional practices are when we go out into those places versus what we're doing in our classrooms. We're definitely not seeing it in our data yet, and that's discouraging for teachers, for leaders, for community members, but we are seeing improved instructional practices in classrooms. And we want to continue to work on that. I know we've got some great data discussions going on, very in-depth discussions, looking at CAP data and then comparing students' CAP data to their FastBridge data, try to determine where exactly is their gaps so that we can be more specific in targeting what they need. And so those are going to be benefits to kids too as we go forward. Some of the PD that we've recently had really focuses on that secondary structured literacy piece, because we know these decreases in 7th, 8th, and 10th grades have been something we've been seeing for a long time. But our secondary teachers are not really trained in those decoding level or basic level reading skills. So the PD we've been bringing in has been focused around how do we get those skills happening, being taught at the middle school level. So we brought in a presenter from Colorado on September 30th. She'll be back on March 28th. And it was very well received by staff members, and we're hoping we're going to see some impact in instructional practices based on that. And we also have 19 secondary teachers that signed up for letters training this year. So 40% of our cohort this year is secondary teachers. So we felt that was a real positive. All of our ESL teachers at the high school are enrolled in letters this year, which is going to be a huge benefit for our entry level foreign language speaking students. So, questions?
Excuse me. You might speak to a little bit about how the assessment is changing now too.
Oh, yeah. So we are getting all new assessments next year. So this comparison next year is going to be different, yes. We'll be comparing apples to oranges for sure. So all new ELA, math and science assessments. It will probably be a later than normal presentation because when we get new assessments, the state has to set benchmarks, which means we probably won't get our data until well into the fall. Normally we get it on July 4th, the week of July 4th. So it's going to be kind of a different process next year.
I have 3 questions. So how do you think that COVID affected, like, how long do you think that's gonna be in play? Do you think the kids that started, that were with that are just kind of going to be behind the curve until they graduate? Second, when the level 1s, how much do you think that is impacted by our immigrant students and our ESL students? And then third, do we do anything like mentoring? So the teachers that are doing great and saw those increases, do we do stuff with them to help the other teachers of their grade? This is how I do it, and it's working.
Yeah, in fact, coaches, the instructional coaches arrange a lot of walkthroughs across buildings. In fact, last week I went with some Georgia Matthews teachers over to Buffalo Jones as well as Jenny Wilson to look at some of the instructional practices they had going on in kindergarten and first grade because we have some relatively new kindergarten and first teachers in that building. So coaches are really good about arranging those walkthroughs and trying to build those skills up for those entry-level teachers to get to where our teachers are that are kind of our exemplars. And it's really taken probably the last 3 years to really build that so that we have some really great things going on that we want to make sure that we start spreading. So we definitely do that. Absolutely, I think, the demographics of our community absolutely affect our assessment scores. That's kind of why we like to put the comparison of Dodge and Liberal in there, because they're similar size, similar demographics. And so we're dealing with some of the same issues. And so when we're trending higher than them or in a more positive direction than them, we feel like we're at least in a better position. But ultimately, we want to at least get to where the state is because we want our kids to be able to perform at the same level as peers their age when they go post-secondary. So,
Is there any way that you can separate the ESL data from the EL data? Because during the craziness of maybe we're going to close some schools, I think it would have been nice if we could have said to parents that are like, I don't want my kid to go to this school because they have lower numbers. And if we could have said, if I would have had that information and I could have said, oh, but look, English language learners are performing here and they've got they have a high number of ESL students, but that doesn't impact the learning of the English language learners.
right. Yeah, the demographics on some of those buildings in question are definitely different. The ESL population, the low SES on some of those buildings was very different than the rest of the buildings throughout the district, for sure. But yeah, we can pull that data.
You talk about, sorry.
Go ahead.
You talk about focusing on the 3 and 4s,
Mhm.
increasing the 3 and 4s, but based on your definitions at the beginning, 2 is passing
Mhm.
basically,
Right.
3 and 4 is just exceeding.
Mhm.
is there any, like, should we be focusing a little bit more maybe on the ones and reducing the ones to get them to at least a 2 or 3 or, and then increase 3 or 4? I don't know if there's some thought on that or whatnot.
The state presents it both ways, that decreasing the level ones is definitely a way to go.
Yeah.
Increasing 3s and 4s is for the kids' benefit. I think Dr. Dominguez's philosophy has been teaching to the top.
Mhm.
And so that's why our KISA goal was set at increasing the levels 3s and 4s. But yes, decreasing those level ones, because we know if they can get to a level 2, they have a much higher chance of being successful at whatever it is they want to do. I mean, it doesn't mean college, could be, trade school, whatever, but they are more likely to be successful. And then the higher they go in those levels, it becomes way more opportunity for success.
And I think that we don't, when we say we want to increase our 3s and 4s, we're not ignoring the ones. We obviously want our 1s to move to 2s, our 2s to move to 3s and 4s, and our 3s to move to 4s. So we want every kid to do better and every kid to grow. And so decreasing our level 1s will automatically cause those things to go up.
Do you think, when will you see the full results, maybe of the letters training? And you talked a little bit about it, we're investing a lot into that. But I know there's a lag into that a little bit because of the training component. Is it like a year we're gonna see like maybe some results from that, you think, or 2 years? I know that the tests are changing, but what is your estimate on that, I guess?
Anytime you implement change, it's 3 to 5 years before you see a lot of change in data. And I mean, we are anxious and excited about seeing those numbers change. And so it is kind of discouraging when we don't see that change, but 3 to 5 years. And with what we started with TNTP, we're just entering that 3-year window. Letters, we've got one cohort that's completely done that finished in the spring. So realistically, it could be 2 to 3 more years before we really see significant changes in our numbers. I think initially with our first cohort, we did see some good change in numbers, but those were all early elementary teachers. And that first book is all around those foundational skills, those early elementary skills. And I think we kind of saw a little bit of a bump in our fast bridge, not on our cap, but we did see it in our fast bridge initially. I think because we've seen a little bit of growth, those increases are going to look a little bit smaller because we've made that first big step, and then the ones after that are going to be a little bit more. But I just think once we get all the things in place, it'll be better. Looking at Fast Bridge, our kindergarten Fast Bridge last year ended really well. And our kindergarten kids would be the first ones that we had the right tools in place from the first day they got there. And so we're watching that group closely as they go through first and second grade. Are we still on the right track with them? Because we started them off right. If we see that fall in first grade winter that we typically see in our data, then that would be a little bit more concerning to me. Because right now it's very encouraging what we're seeing with them.
And I would piggyback on that. One of the things that I see when I go to, and I'm in the elementary buildings talking about kindergarten data, when the kids are starting kindergarten this year, they're starting in a lot higher place on their Fast Bridge data than they've ever started before. And I think that's because a lot of the things that we're doing at Garfield align specifically. They're doing Haggerty, which is the phonemic awareness component. They're starting that at 3 and 4 years old with those kiddos. And so they've already had exposure to that before they even get to kindergarten. They have a much stronger background on that. So I think it's going to be a while before we see the payoff for that, but we're definitely seeing some very promising data at the early grades for sure.
I mean, what we're seeing from kids is good. It's just not on data yet. And it's discouraging for teachers. I know it is, because they're excited. The comments that I get from teachers when I'm in classrooms is, man, they just are doing so much better than what I normally see when they come in here. I've heard it from first grade teachers, heard it from kindergarten teachers, but we want to see huge jumps in data. We're just not, which that's just unreasonable expectations on our part, really, but it's going to be baby steps.
Last question, I promise. Okay. I know when I was teaching, there was a big conversation of teaching to a test and whatnot and all of those
Yeah.
conversations going on. But are there ways that the kids and like get used to the question types? I'm assuming that's, we can still do that, okay.
They have, within KITE, or the state assessment system is KITE, they have mini tests, which are released test items that teachers can put up on the board and kind of work through with kids as a group. We also required the interim assessments, which are a practice state assessment, and those are treated the same way as the actual state assessment. They have to remain confidential. Kids are not allowed to work together. They have to work independently. And it's captured within the same online system as the summative end of year assessments. It's always been optional up until this year, but we are requiring it this year. Because we felt like with a new assessment, we really need to get kids prepared for what that's gonna look like. And some of the intervention tools that we've been using over the years, do not have the level of rigor that the state assessment does. And that's, you know, we feel like when they get into these online programs and it says, oh yeah, they're improving, it's not the same as improving on CAP, because those CAP questions are so much harder than what programs like IXL are. And so that some of those intervention programs, I think, mislead people into thinking they're gonna do better. But we've got to get them in those interims so they see what the actual assessments look like and how rigorous they're gonna be.
Heather, Michelle, thank you for being here and putting this presentation together. I do appreciate it. You know, you may have answered this a little bit and talked about the letters training and so on, but when I look at that, and Michelle, you talked a little bit about the math. When we look at that 10th grade math, 73% at a level 1, and we got 2 more years between the rest of this year and 2 more years with those students. What do you see, or is there any insight that you have that how we can at least bring that up on those individuals?
Well, it's really been bothering me.
Or I'm sorry, anywhere along the
Yeah.
line there in
Well,
any grade.
I guess the thing that bothers me the most right now is that the curriculum that we're using K through 12 is been vetted, and they are 2 of the strongest curriculums in math available. And they're more rigorous than our state assessments. And so that's what's bothering me the most about why our level 1s just keep going up, and why we're not. So to me, it's an implementation issue. And so I've been trying hard this year to get into more math classrooms and make sure we're using the curriculum like we're supposed to be using it. And part of it could be that we've focused so much on ELA for 3 years, and we haven't done the same with math yet. And our intention is to go that direction once we feel like ELA is going the way we need, because we feel like if you can't read, you can't do anything. Once we can read, now we can focus on our instruction across the board in all subject areas and our implementation of the curriculums that we have purchased and that we use. I think it's got to be something along those lines. And I just have to spend a lot more time in the classrooms figuring out where are we not implementing like we need to.
Thank you.
Question sort of related to that. When I was in school, English reading came super easy to me, super easy, but I struggled with math until I got in the 5th grade, and I had a teacher, Jenny Wilson, and she was from New York, and she was not like anybody we had ever had here. And we had to do time trials on the board, and every day was the last one done. And one day, and she would come over and she would talk to me, and one day I turned around and she started clapping. I was like, she was like, you're the first one done, and it's right. And so math just clicked for me. Is there a time when it's too late for that to happen with kids? Like, could it happen in 10th or 11th grade if they got a teacher that just really communicated with them the way their brain works? It's not too late.
Yeah, and especially in math, because math becomes more abstract the older you get. Sometimes the child's brain is not ready for the abstractness of whatever's being taught. And it takes another year or 2 for their brain to catch up with how abstract the math has become. And then they figure it out. It might be college before they figure it out, but it's never too late to learn mathematics for sure.
I think for English, math, all of our subject areas, it it spirals and things come back. So if you've missed something and struggled with it, yeah, you have an opportunity when it comes back through, but it's gonna come back through with a higher level of complexity. So if you still don't get it, it's like, it just builds on you. And so, we are really trying to build our tier one instruction so it's more rigorous, but at the same time, we've got to get those supports and interventions really going well for kids, because those ones that missed something, it just builds and becomes more and more and more. It's just like one more thing on top of them, pushing them farther behind. So, I mean, it's a balance of how do we keep it rigorous so that we're pushing all kids, but how do we support the ones who have gaps so that we can fill those gaps without it just drowning them.
Well, I think we all have different thinking and learning styles, and sometimes it's just getting that teacher that understands. And that's what I needed, just like a little tiny tweak in what they'd been telling me. And I was like, oh, this makes perfect sense. It was just like the light bulb went on. Thank you.
What are the graduation requirements in regard to math and English?
I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, 3.5 English, correct? And
Yeah, English 1, 2, and 3, and then an English elective.
and math is.
They have to have algebra 1, they have to have geometry, and then they have to have one more math elective. So algebra 1 and geometry are required.
So, are our graduation requirements in alignment with the state requirements, or are they more rigorous in the state?
Rigorous.
Yeah.
The state requires 21 credits to graduate, and we recently changed the high school. What is it? 24? Okay. So we're at 24. So we're 3 credits higher than the state. Except for Achieve. I think they do go by
They're
21.
still 21. Achieve and the virtual are 21. Garden City High School is 24.
But Andy, to your point on the math side, it's algebra 1, geometry 1, and then those are some of the lower maths. So if you're not getting into algebra 2 or pre-cal or cal, then I mean, those are higher level maths. So
I would say probably 80% of our kids take algebra 2. There's very few, I mean, that's where they start. And then the ones who would end up just with a math credit would be the ones who struggled with algebra 2 and couldn't pass algebra 2. But I would say 80 to 90% of our kids are taking algebra 2 or higher. There's a lot of kids that take advanced algebra, honors trig, college algebra, all of those things too.
What do you, in your opinion, what do you think both within our district and really statewide is causing the significant drop off in math scores when you get to middle school and above?
I think it's a mentality.
What do you mean?
And it's
Elaborate on that.
what?
What do you mean? Please elaborate on
Like,
that.
I think that kids start to believe that I can't do it about 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and then they give up. And I think it's that way nationwide. I don't think it's just the state of Kansas. I think that they, a lot of times the mathematics gets hard, it's hard enough that their parents can't help them anymore. And so then they don't know where to go to get the help, to get the resources they need to be successful. And then parents say things like, oh, I was never good at math. And then they hear that. And so then they think it's okay to not be good at math because my mom and dad weren't good at math. I think it's nationwide.
Do you think that, because I've watched my grandkids and my stepdaughter do homework, and I'm sorry, I think that writing the problems down on paper and getting rid of this for math might solve some of our problems.
I don't disagree.
I mean,
Every
it's
teacher is different.
ridiculous to try to do math and tab through, and I'm just like, because sometimes just writing that on the paper and you're like, oh,
Every
and
teacher's
this is
different.
not the same, you know?
They aren't using their iPads that much from K through 6. They have their consumables that they use, and they do a lot of writing and drawing. And then in 7th and 8th grade, they are using, they're making copies of the illustrative mathematics and the kids are doing that. I think it's happening in more so in high school. But there's a lot of things you can do electronically. When I taught, I preferred the kids to do it on paper. But everyone that teaches is different and everyone has their own styles of what works for them. And the same is true for kids on what works best for them.
When you use a different part of your brain when you're writing than when you're typing.
And there is research about even the tactile input of writing versus typing. I mean, there is research that, kind of supports that physically writing, does.
I mean, I do technology for a living, but I'm a little old school about some things.
The only thing that I would disagree a little bit on that is when we say that kids don't have tools if their parents can't help them, they do. They can Google any math problem in the world and get the solution to it. So it does make it harder for our teachers to then determine, can they really do this? Or did they have an online tool that helped them get to the correct answer? So, at times it does make it more challenging for teachers in math because you can snap a picture of any math problem and it'll immediately give you the solution. So how is a teacher supposed to determine from homework whether a kid could do the work or whether they went to the right place to find the answer?
They probably don't have that available when they take a test, do they?
No, they do not. So we find it there.
Good question.
Yeah.
So, you had mentioned professional development days. One, do you think that we have the right professional development model for that? And two, what percentage of our teachers would you say attend those?
I think over the last couple of years, we've kind of calculated it that we've got at least 30% that don't come. So that's a problem. And then even throughout September 30th, you could see people leaving throughout the day. So even if you get them there, they don't stay. So, we brought in some really good presenters on September 30th. In fact, I sent 3 ELA teachers to a variety of things over the summer because I wanted feedback on which ones should we bring in, which ones are meeting the needs that you have in your classrooms. And the presenter we brought in was very well received by the 3 people that went over the summer. So, we were really positive and excited about it. So to see that lack of excitement when we know there is such a significant need at that secondary level is discouraging.
Thank you.
And letters, there are districts that are requiring all teachers to take letters training. We only require it at K3. The state is requiring it on your license, either an assessment or a course in science of reading. If you teach in an elementary school, which that could be K4 for some of our buildings, it could be K6 for others. So but they're encouraging it there, but there is a need at our secondary levels for them to understand that as well. And it's not required by the state, it's not required by us. And I wish that we had more secondary involved in that because I think it would help them to be able to identify what it is that kids need to fill their reading gap.
Questions? Thank you for bringing the truth and the hard topics to us. We
It's
always
not-
hear about the good things, so I appreciate.
This is our reality. This is what we work on every day. And this is what our teachers face every day.
President, I would also say, how about moving forward with Haggerty, with UFly, with letters? And not just Garfield, but first grade to second grade to third. It's gonna take time. So we will see benefits, yes or no?
Yeah, I mean, when we summarize FastBridge, we'll summarize FastBridge for you in February so that we can have our fall and winter data, complete. But we have historically seen very good data out of Haggerty. By second grade, we've got 80% of kids demonstrating phonemic awareness skills. That goes up to 90% by third grade. Now, I wish that was happening a year or two sooner, but we are getting kids where they need to be eventually on some of those skills. Phonics is something we identified as a really big weakness, and we targeted that with UFly last year. But it is, it's a new initiative. Really, it needs 3 years to be implemented well for there to be significant change in student data. And for our kids that are in 5th and 6th grade, they're not getting UFly every day in class. If they get it, it's gonna have to be through intervention or some intervention program. So I think it's gonna be even longer for us to kind of see that because our K1, 2, 3 kids are the ones that are seeing it every day, and it's gonna be a while before those kids move through the system. And what Letters is telling us is if kids are behind midway through their 1st grade year, it's extremely rare that they catch up. So it's critical that we get kids where they need to be by the middle of 1st grade, or statistically, the chances of them catching up are like 10 or 11%. It's very low.
I have one more question. So you said that we're due to do an ELA adoption of curriculum. Do you think that's wise, like to adopt a new curriculum and ask our teachers to learn a new curriculum when we're just getting the process started and maybe gaining a little bit of momentum? Does that, I don't know, I'm just asking, does that stomp down the success a little bit? How does that typically go?
For elementary, I think any of them would tell you we've got to do something with our ELA curriculum there because we adopted Haggerty and UFly because the current curriculum is grounded in old research in the reading first and guided reading strategies, which we're not supposed to be doing that anymore because we know it had such a negative impact on kids. But we're still using those materials because we have a 7-year textbook cycle and we just financially don't have the money to throw that out and start over. So, we've been band-aiding it basically by adding Haggerty, adding UFly. But what you're saying though is how overwhelming is it for teachers to learn a new curriculum? I think we've got to, for our, the stories part, the literature part, the knowledge pieces of ELA, we have to. Now, we are definitely asking curriculum vendors, can we keep UFly and Haggerty and keep those pieces and use it with your curriculum effectively? Because if teachers are comfortable and if our data is positive over the next 2 years, it makes sense to stay with that. But, if we don't see any change in our data in the next couple years, then it may be beneficial to go with whatever that structured literacy piece is that comes with our new curriculum.
We did have some pretty positive spots in the elementary schools. Jenny Wilson, almost 58% of their kids scored in 3s and 4s. They did outstanding last year. Comparatively, if you want to compare, Victor and Alice outperformed what Holcomb Elementary School did last year. So if you want to compare it, Buffalo Jones is right there along the same level. So for us, we did have some very positive schools that saw significant growth last year, like Jenny Wilson, Eda Sharman in their 4s. They saw big growth in their 4s. So we did see some very positive things with some of those schools. Especially, we're very impressed with what Jenny Wilson did with what they were able to do last year with that growth.
In those early grades, our K1 data, VO for phonics, looking specifically at phonics within Fastbridge, 80% of their kids were above benchmark. So now we don't have CAP data for them. We won't until they get to 3rd grade. So, there's indicators there that we're going to see a positive trend. We just have a little bit of time before that's going to show up in those assessment scores.
With those demographics of VO, if you compare the demographics of VO to the demographics of Holcomb Elementary, it's a totally different set of kids. For them to be able, for what Tracy did at VO, that's pretty impressive to be able to outperform. We have, Ingalls does a really good job at the elementary level. Jenny Wilson blew their doors off this year, and that's the first time that's happened in a long time. So there were some positive positive things. We had to find, a little bit what, like Nathan was talking to, find what the positive things were in those buildings and how they did those things and bridge those into those other buildings to, have more of a systemic approach to how we do things.
Thank you.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to item F2, the long range facilities plan update. Mr. Anderson.
Good evening, board. I just want to give you an update. Obviously, a long-range facilities plan is something I think you guys have approved, the ultimate long-range facilities plan. But that document kind of becomes fluid as things change, as problems arise, and obviously as you guys deal with a difficult decision like you made a couple of meetings ago, that kind of changes some pressure points or some areas where you might focus or we weren't focusing on before. So I wanted to come before you today, and I plan to do this about twice a year at a minimum, and certainly open and kind of discuss some tweaks and changes that we're making to this 25-year plan or suggesting to do. Obviously, a lot of these will come to you guys ultimately, like in an agenda item here in a little bit. We're going to talk about engineering and architecture services for free roofs. So kind of talk about it, and I'll go through each one of these scenarios and then open it up for questions if you don't mind. But what we're looking at doing this summer, and I've got two columns over there to the right. One is planned and one is with alternates, and I'll explain that as I go. But ultimately, right now, we have about $4,444,000 worth of projects in the plan category. I'll go down the list of what was in the plan, but what's been changed. At Abe Hubert, we have flooring, both interior flooring as well as in the gym floor. That was on the original plan. At Abe Hubert, the change though from the original plan was we had a substantial amount set in there for HVAC improvements. That bid was bid twice, brought to y'all, and we decided we kind of want to put that in the back burner for now and see what's going wrong there. And so what we budgeted there is $60,000 for repairs to that system for the next year. The Bernadine Sitz one is a roof replacement. It is badly needed, and kind of as we talk with staff and also the architectures, we kind of watch a running age of these roofs and how they're wearing, and when we get up there, what we actually see, and then the incidents of leaks. The reason that one's highlighted right now, the budget for that, and you'll see it later, is $2.3 million for a total replacement of that roof. However, if they're able to scan that roof and they can go in and not actually have to do a total replacement, just do an overlay, we're looking at a much lower amount, which is in the right-hand column of $1.15 million. So those are some things that we talk about that become fluid as you look at this. Next item, which was on there, is district-wide roof repairs at $115,000. New playground equipment, which we'll discuss later in a later agenda item as well, at Edith Sherman. That was budgeted. Florence Wilson, the gym floor was budgeted. Garfield is one that right now in the plan column is zero. However, if some of these things come in and tweak and the amounts come in differently, I've got one, and we'll talk about it at the agenda item as well, that half of Garfield's roof is in bad need of replacement. So we've got that listed here as well. Gertrude Walker, the wireless clock system at Gertrude Walker needs some work done. And then also repairs roof wide at Gertrude Walker on the roof. $100,000 for that. The next item is at Horace Good. It's a project that's kind of one of those ticking projects that we know at any time that's the last boiler that we've got in the district. So we know that one is something that we need to address if possible. And again, it's similar to the Garfield. It's zero planned right now, but you see the actual projected cost in the right-hand column with alternates. Jenny Barker, carpet at Jenny Barker. Plymale, the fire alarm system at Plymale actually was moved from Gertrude Walker. When we're comparing those two systems, Plymale was actually a building that we were talking about, possibly not having and moving forward with, but now that we are moving forward, that fire alarm is in bad need of repair and needs totally replaced. It's in worse shape than Gertrude Walker's is. An HVAC replacement there, and again, you see another darkened category in the plan, $822,000. That's for a VRF system similar to what we put into a lot of the other districts. But we actually did go and tour that campus and went and looked at the current system, and we believe with the size of that building that we can go in and actually a lot of the furnaces that we've got there are still in good shape. There's about 3 to 4 that probably need looked at. So what we're gonna do is bring somebody in to go through and just work them and make, and kind of go through and do a check. We believe we could possibly fix that and still have it in as good a shape as we need any building for about $250,000 instead of 822. So again, what I talked about, things could be fluid as we move through this process. Fascia and soffit repair needs done at Plymale. Interior flooring needs done at Plymale. And then the roof replacement there at Plymale is something that needs done as well. And then the last small item is $5,000 at the service center. So, and that's out at plant facilities. So wanted to bring that to you. Worst case scenario, we have to pay full amount for everything that we've got projected on there. We're able to do the planned column, which is about 4.4 million. Best case scenario is we're able to maximize some dollars. We even may have an item on the Plymale roof replacement. We may be looking at another technology that we'll bring forward to you guys before we would move forward on anything like that as well. That might bring that price down too. So worst case scenario or best case scenario with alternates, if we can add these other projects, we're looking at about 4.6 million. So with that, I'll be quiet for a minute and let y'all ask any questions you might have on the long range plan for this summer. Bored you to death. I'm sorry.
I like that we're looking at, repurposing or extending the life of existing, and then maybe we can transfer that money to other projects that might be coming up. That's how, in a for-profit business, that's how we have to do things, and it's nice to see that being done here. So I appreciate the effort into that.
Well, I think moving forward, and obviously I'm new, but I have an incredible staff. I've got one that knows where a lot of things are. If he ever decides to retire, I want to be in a world of hurt. But we're also working with GMCN. I think all of our thought process in this whole discussion has been, you know, yes, do we want those VRS? Do we want the bright, shiny things? Yes, but it's just like we have to do it, our budgets at home, and obviously we're accountable to the taxpayers. So if we can maximize or get best bang for our buck, we're definitely going to look at it.
Yes, my comment is, you know, I'm apprehensive to dive into in the 2025 year for 2025, any of the major projects at Gertrude Walker or Jenny Barker or Plymale, aside from roof repairs that we've talked about. I'd be apprehensive to do the full roof replacement at Plymale. And obviously I think it's right and necessary to look at the HVAC. If there's any HVAC issues at Plymale that need to be addressed. I just think as a board, I mean, there's $1 million of planned improvements amongst those 3 schools. Aside from just, if you kind of back out the repair work, some of this roof repair. Our takeaway from that vote is that if we as a board think that the topic of grade reconfiguration is something that we plan to bring back up in the next year or 2 under the new superintendent, I would just be cautious about spending that much money on the buildings, and we might look at closing or repurposing in the near future. So I mean, we know when we toured those buildings, you know, it was raining that night. There was a water leak coming through the ceiling in the library at Plymale. I mean, we know there's things that need to be repaired. I certainly don't want to defer needed repairs, but I personally am apprehensive to to make these system replacements at any of those buildings at this juncture.
Certainly, this is the plan, kind of what we'll talk about in a later agenda item. As those expenditures come through, they'll be brought forth to you guys as a group, for further discussion before we move any further as well.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I would just say, I don't know that we want to, I think we as a board ought to make a decisions about, you know, if we want to, if we want to, say, do a full re-roof of Plymouth, we should make that decision before we ask our staff to you know, pay the architect to design it, and put it out to bid. It's, you know, we would be spending money on design services. We'd be asking staff time to be dedicated to that, we'd be exercising the subcontractor community to be bidding these projects. We want to keep those folks interested in bidding them. So I just think it's due diligence on our part to have, you know, this discussion before we ask Brandon and his staff to hold their head in the game. And if we want to as a board, I mean, I'm being support of whatever the board wants to do. I just ask that we think about what we want to be doing over the next year or two related to that question before we push ahead with any capital projects or anything in the buildings that might be affected.
My only fear is if we continue to defer the maintenance on these buildings, if it does stay open and that's just 2 more years of more expense that it's, you know, we all know the prices aren't going down. So if we don't do it this year, we do it 2 years from now, we didn't save any money. You get what I'm saying? So I don't know how. I don't remember the carpet being that bad in Jenny Bar, or I mean Pineville. I'm not questioning it. Have you been through those?
Yes.
Or you're just going off the list?
No, I've been through those.
So it's needed. It's on there. Okay. But that's my fear is just how long do we've deferred the maintenance on these buildings. We keep doing that. It's just gonna cost more money if we decide to keep them open or repurpose them or whatever.
Right.
So.
I'm open anytime you guys want to call and discuss this further at a later date, feel free to contact me. You know, like I've talked about, it's a fluid document. None of this is set in stone. You know, we could have something happen that could sure dictate and change the direction this has to go as well with those funds. But just think it's good to keep you guys on the same page and where we're at and have discussions and be open about them. And obviously, if this was easy, you know, everyone would still be here wanting to support you guys and what you do. So I appreciate what you guys do on a weekly basis.
Thank you for doing that. To our attention.
Next item.
Okay. Nothing further for that? Okay, move on to the next item. G1, Board of Education is asked to consider and approve the quote for a preventive maintenance agreement with Tetro Plumbing in the amount of $89,125 for a 1-year term. Brandon's up again.
So this was presented to you guys at your last meeting, and typically would have stayed on the consent agenda, but there's a change. If you turn to page 108, which is the first page of the take-home agreement, there was a question brought up by a board member about what the rates would be above and beyond if it was something that wasn't within the scope of this agreement, what they would agree, or would they lock in a rate to do that? That rate's been added to this, so it didn't change the scope of the original agreement, but it clarified anything above and beyond that. So wanted to put it on unfinished business. I still believe today you guys, through your action, could take it and go ahead and approve it and move forward. I still recommend that we approve the Tetro preventative maintenance agreement.
refresh my memory of why we're just doing it for 1 year.
Well, my hope is, and that we actually kind of did some adjusting and we've been able to hire. We hope we don't hire. Yeah. The opposite end of that. Two individuals to come on board as HVAC specialists. Right now, we only have one HVAC apprentice. My ultimate goal is to be able to hopefully learn from this process as we go through it with Tetro. Certainly might be something that we do consider again, but I'd like to be able to move this in-house ultimately, because while Tetro is going to be up there looking at our HVAC equipment, because that's what our agreement says, if I could have my staff up there looking at it, we're going to be looking at our HVAC, we're going to be looking at our roof, we're going to be looking at roof drains, we're going to be looking at soffits, we're going to be doing a lot more thorough investigation when we're up there. And I tried to give them, you see if they'd give us some quotes, but they were in favor of, since it's new to them too, moving forward with the 1 year agreement. Sorry.
I missed some of the conversation around this last meeting. I wasn't here, but I had a couple questions. I understand this is just kind of a service agreement, but most of those systems were put in 2022. Are a lot of the parts still covered under a manufacturer warranty, or what was the warranty on that? You may not know.
I don't know that off the top of my head. Some of them, obviously craftsmanship, a lot of times is at least 1 year, and then just depends on the unit and what you're dealing with, but probably anywhere from 3 to 5 years, I would think there would be some kind of warranty.
It's a little probably off the topic of what we're talking about here, but it has to do with these systems that were put in. Are we tracking efficiency on that, or is there, I know there was a guaranteed savings by putting those in?
My understanding was that after a year, they were supposed to come back and track those and bring us some data back within the original agreement. I don't know that that's been done yet, with, Honeywell. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't think of the name, but Brad and I, Scott Cotty and I were just visiting about that the other day. We need to jingle in and find out. That was the original intent.
That was part of the original.
Yes, sir.
Questions? He's looking to move forward, if so.
Mr. President, I would make a motion that we, approve the 1 year agreement with Tetro Plumbing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your left hand. Opposed, same. Motion carries. Move on to item H, new business. H1, curriculum council items. Josh Scott.
I just have a couple of classes that the high school would like approved. The first one is just to have an honors government class at Garden City High School. It would be the same classes as before, but it would be the honors portion of that. So this would be for our kiddos that are, it'd give more opportunities for like our gifted kiddos and kids that are on a higher track and AP track, things like that. And so the high school's asking for the addition to that one. And then the second one is the peer leadership 2 class. And so our peer leaders at Garden City High School, they work with Paul Lappin's class in special education, and they do a lot with the kiddos up there. They help them on the coffee cart, and really become mentors to those kiddos that are in the special needs classrooms and support them. This would be a second piece to that, where they would be able to do it a second time, and it would work in conjunction with the LIFT program so that they could also, the purpose there would be to take those kiddos that are in Paul's class into an elective class in the gen ed setting, to where they're having an opportunity to participate in one of the electives with typically developing peers to work on those social skills and things like that. And they would be filling the role of a para for those kiddos while they're in there. So that's gonna support our kiddos while they're in the classroom, but also give them some work experience as well in that field. So those are the two courses. Paul's done really well. I think that's been a really good, I don't know how many teachers we gotten out of that, Drew. A lot of the kiddos that work through and are peer models or do the peer program for Paul have gone on to become teachers for us or in a teacher program right now to become teachers for us. And so I think the more kiddos that we can get in that, the better for, that's just another avenue for us to grow our own here in Garden City.
It helps us as a one-on-one, it helps us with a more inclusive environment for those kids, being able to go into the gen ed setting. Obviously, you guys are aware we can't hire. We don't have the availability of a ton of pairs to be able to put. So what Paul's done is partnered them up so they get an hour to be able to go into a gen ed setting, elective classroom with that peer mentor. So it's a one-of-a-kind program, that's for sure. You're not going to find what Paul and those guys up there do is pretty special. And they get paid. So we're good.
Okay, so first read, so we got consent agenda. Any other questions?
If you have questions moving forward, just reach out to me. We'll be on the agenda next time. Thank you.
Item H2, architect engineering proposals, the first read. Director of Plant Facilities, Brandon Anders.
Tired of me. So this is what I referenced. These are basically three architecture and engineering services proposal that were drawn up by GMCN. The three that are on here, and I'll reference them. The first one is Bernadine Sites. If you go to page 141, is that agreement. This is the one that I talked about. There's two scopes, basically. Re-roof option A is a projected cost of $1,050,000 to $1,155,000. Re-roof option B is a complete tear off, estimated at 2.13 or 2.3 million. Ultimately, what we're approving today is only this architect agreement, services agreement to move forward. If we trigger this and sign this, the first thing that would happen is they're going to come scan that roof to find out which option we would actually go with. And then on page 142 are the two options. Best case scenario, they scan it. It's dry underneath. We don't have to tear everything off. We can go with option A, which is the cheaper route. Shouldn't say cheaper route, the less expensive route. And then their fee is $47,250. So that fee, they draw up the specs, the standards, they start the process, they put it out for bid, get the bids back, and it comes to you guys before you would ultimately approve us to move forward with either option. But I feel like I would like to see us go ahead and approve this one to get the ball rolling towards a lot of those moving parts on the plan, because Bernadine Sits is one, a lot hinges on whether or not we do option A or option B or option 1 or option 2. The second one for your consideration, and they're kind of out of order, but let's talk about Garfield next. Page 138. Garfield's estimated cost is between $1,026,000 and $1,092,000. Their services proposal, their fee would be $47,670 for this one. There's only that one option, so that one's pretty straightforward. I would ask the board to do whatever you feel comfortable doing. Ultimately, though, if it comes back and we're only going to have to do the more expensive option on Bernadine Sits, I would never sign and initiate this, even if you guys were to approve moving forward with these roofing projects. But if ultimately you would prefer that we wait and get the answer at Bernadine Sits and then bring this option back to you, that's absolutely fine too. The only thing is, a lot of times timing of meetings sometimes doesn't always work out where maybe we need to get moving quicker. And so I'm just throwing it out. ultimately, I wouldn't sign Garfield though, unless, even if these both were approved tonight to move forward, I wouldn't initiate Garfield until I found out where Bernadine Sitz was, and I knew I was gonna only be spending that $1 million range. And then this other one would fit into the budget. Plymel then is also in here. It's on page 144. Obviously, there was some discussion earlier, but then there's also another technology that GMCN recommended that I look into. Plymel has some issues with the way we would traverse that. There's a lot of electrical conduit on the roof. That would be very expensive to either way. It'd be very expensive and kind of a risky to patch around that and put a new roof on. It'd be very expensive though also to reroute that, probably $75,000 to $100,000 just to reroute that electric. So one thing we're going to look at first is the technology. I think they're doing a building at Tribune. Alert is the name of the company, and they come in and they do an overbuild of a metal roof. And so he is supposed to be here sometime this week to look at it and bring forth a proposal. Nick with GMCN said it's similar size to the building at Tribune, and that building is around $260,000 roughly cost. So could be something that would solve the problem of the electrical and be a cheaper cost than that 408 that we've got listed on the item. So again, similar circumstance. Up to the board how you want to move forward on approving this today. I wouldn't probably move forward signing this one until I knew what this other technology looked like and brought it back to you guys and talked to you about it anyway. Just because it is a different, it's not a true TPO or a mod bit roof. So now that I've thoroughly confused you, you've got three re-roof architecture and engineering proposals in front of you. One that I'd definitely like you to consider action on at your next meeting is Bernadine Sitz. And then also the circumstance that if Bernadine Sitz comes in and scans well, that we could move forward with Garfield, maybe that ability to do it. And then Plymel, I think you've got some things to consider on that particular item as well. Any questions?
So this is just a first read, so we look at this and have as unfinished business on the next.
Well, or it's been on the consent, or I guess however that works.
Whatever you all want us to do. Whatever you all want.
We can break them apart in unfinished business to deal with them based on the information we get at that.
Yeah.
And I may be able to have this quote back from Alert by the next meeting as well.
Okay, that's what I was hoping.
Yeah.
No, I've talked to GMC a little bit about it. I don't have any firsthand experience with it. Are they a vendor? So can you explain? They would be a vendor we could
Yes.
kind of turnkey their package because they're pre-approved through Greenbush.
Yes, sir.
It's like a state purchasing program that allows us to contract with those vendors and not have to bid it out because they've already been.
Greenbush, Sourcewell, Byboard, all those costs have already been negotiated, and so you're supposed to be getting the cheapest cost.
So in that scenario, would we, if we decide to go that way, would GMCN's cost proposal, like with their design services?
We decided to go with Alert. GMCN wouldn't have any involvement because all the engineering and everything's, it's a turnkey deal.
So the GMCN proposal would be just a TPO or mod bit roof?
Brandon, did you need action on SITs to get moving?
That one, I mean, to pull the trigger on the scan, which would get us a little further down the road, maybe even make a better decision at the next meeting when we are discussing those other moving parts. I mean, we could, kind of, to my point, be nice, we're going to use common sense moving forward, but as those dominoes start to fall from an efficiency standpoint, it's not always ideal to have to wait 2 weeks or however that works out.
Would it be beneficial to have a approve the Bernadine sets tonight.
If that's something y'all feel comfortable with, moving forward with Bernadine sits, that starts the dominoes fall. Yes.
I'll make the motion to move forward with Bernadine Sitz proposal here.
It's been moved and seconded that we move forward with the Bernadine Sits proposal as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your left hand. Opposed, same. Motion carries. On to item H3, quotes for either Sherman playground equipment.
Okay, and again, we kind of talked about, the Green Bush. This is a Sourcewell quote from Next Generation Recreation, which we have been utilizing for about the last 3 years, and buying our playground equipment from them. They have been very good to work with. They get, Play World equipment, and a lot of our equipment is Play World, and so they're able to help us out with a lot of older parts as well. I can tell you Brad Stopcotti went to the state meeting last week and brought forth a couple more vendors. Had a phone call and email over the weekend as well. And I put in a couple of phone calls to another vendor this morning. Certainly not guaranteed or required to move forward with this. This was one that was already in the queue when I got here, and we just got the players back to the table and brought this quote in. This quote, it was actually 99,000 turnkey, and that's not counting fencing or concrete. But with that Sourcewell discount, if you look at this page isn't numbered, but it's the third page of the quote. That totals 93,215. What I would like to do though, after obviously consider that, but since it is just a first reading, maybe we could put this on unfinished business next time as well. I'd like to get another quote. I think maybe there's some grant opportunities out there as well. And at least make sure that we're comparing apples to apples with the equipment that we're looking at here. Obviously, Sourcewell is there for a reason, but making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. So that's just a first reading as well, and I'll bring more information hopefully at the next meeting. Questions on that?
This is for new playground equipment or replacing old?
No, it'd be a brand new piece of playground equipment that would go there at Edith Sherman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, Brandon.
We'll move on to item I, board open discussion. John, you're up.
Yeah, appreciate all the information that we got tonight. Obviously the cap data, we have some work to do there. But I'm glad they did bring us that data and the actual data, and I think they're in tune with what's going on, and I think hopefully we'll see some improvement in the years to come there with some of the things that we've implemented. But outside of that, just a lot of good information, and I appreciate Brandon bringing us a lot of different data to look at as far as our roofs and different stuff like that and our long-term facility plan.
I don't really have anything other than what John said. I mean, it's good to, even though it's not always what we want to hear on the testing numbers and things, but it's the reality of what it is.
Just as Jackie and John said, I really appreciated, the honesty or just the straightforward and transparency on the cap information. I was kind of trying to look through things, and look and kind of work, count the years backwards in my head. And I believe, if I'm right, the third graders that were tested last year they were kindergartners in 2020, 2021. That really disruptive. Not the year that we didn't come back from spring break, but that following year when there was a lot of in and out. So I think we're still a little ways out from seeing what unaffected students look like with the new teaching models that we've implemented with letters and UFly and that sort of thing. And so I really think, I'm optimistic about what the future's, how those science and reading elements are gonna, impact our students moving forward. And really kind of, I appreciate what Michelle's comments about, what she thought was causing that, not just our drop off, but kind of nationwide drop off with math as they get into high school. And, yeah, continuing to find ways to overcome that. Brandon, I appreciate, you coming tonight and talking to us about the capital plan. Now you've had a chance to get your feet on the ground. I know you've done a lot of work going around and looking at all the buildings and reassessing and kind of bringing back a revised recommendation to us. I really value your opinion in that. I just challenge us as a board. We voted at the end of September about not moving forward grade reconfiguration right now. I feel like our discussion probably isn't settled yet. I think we need to have a continuation of that and talk about how we want to handle capital improvements on some of those buildings over the next year or two. Because, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way against putting capital projects into any of those buildings, if those are buildings we're going to continue to use. But I hate to see us spend money or paint ourselves into a corner and not do something that we feel is right because we did something, we spend money on projects now, and then a different subcommittee in a year or two comes up with a recommendation that recommends we close a building we spent hundreds of thousands or $1 million into. So, I mean, that obviously we've gone through a lot of tough discussions and topics over the last several months. I just feel like this is when we got to talk a little bit more through, and ultimately what we decide. I want to be supportive of. I just encourage us to kind of talk through that a little bit more before we ask Brandon to just forge ahead, because I definitely want to see us making all these needed improvements on buildings that we plan to keep in the future.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said. So, sometimes the truth hurts and it's tough, but I would rather just be told where we're at, and the honesty, I appreciate that. And I do agree. I think we have the right people in place, that it will turn around, and we are in that weird COVID. We're suffering the end of that wrath now. So I think there's a optimism for the future, but I agree with everything else that everybody said.
I enjoyed the presentation as a fairly new board member that has been really occupied with one topic for, 6 or 7 months. It's nice to get in there and learn some of the other things about the school district that will help us make qualified decisions. So I enjoyed the presentation. And again, yes, I'm sure it wasn't fun to get up there with those numbers, but I appreciate that we got them. And then I touched on this a little bit before, but I really appreciate Brandon, your team. Sometimes nonprofits get a really bad rap, or tax-based entities, that it's free money, so they just spend it however they want. And so I appreciate the options and looking into different ways of doing things than just to put it with something shiny and new. So looking forward to how all the Halloween celebrations for the kiddos. I'm sure they're excited to get candy and fun things at school. That's all I got.
Brandon, thank you for all the information there. Going forward, this is going to be interesting how we move forward with all of this, and hopefully we'll find out some good things that will help us save some money. Appreciate the information Heather and Michelle brought to us with the CAP data. I hope that when we look at the Fast Bridge, right? Fast Bridge?
Yes, sir.
In February, that we'll see some different numbers. I know my daughter, who's a teacher, has told me, Dad, you need to look at the Fast Bridge, so look at the CAP. But we have to look at both. I mean, we are required to do that, I guess. So looking forward to hearing from them in February and how that goes and moves forward. So it is a little concerning when you look at the numbers. 10th grade, 73%, level 1 in math. hopefully that will move forward, get some better numbers. And then down in the elementary, what we're hearing and seeing down there, that's some, information there that is reassuring that we are heading in the right direction.
Well, I agree with everybody. Appreciate Andy and his comments too about evaluating what we do effectively and moving forward where we're gonna go. I do appreciate, I know I missed a couple meetings and apologize for all that, but I've seen a lot of positive things, how we build community, partnerships within the school system. I saw on our Facebook page, this is the School Bus Safety Week, and so I appreciate all of our transportation department and all that they're doing to get our kids safely to school and home safely from school. And so I appreciate each and every one of them, as well as I believe it was School Lunch Week last week, and I just appreciate all the hardworking nutrition department workers and all that they're doing to make sure everybody gets fed safely and throughout the school year as well. And so I just appreciate everybody, and I know there's lots of awards and things that are out there that are coming, and so I very much appreciate just how hardworking all of our staff is at making things come together. And so it's just a positive thing, and we're moving forward. While the data isn't showing it 100% right now, there are good things happening, so. That's all I got.
Dr. Dominguez?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Pastor Heck, about the lunch nutrition week last week. That's big because those individuals they're on the classified side, but they actually provide such a needed service and support our students. And then this week, as you said, Safety Week. Many times they're the first and last touch point for our students. So that's always want to celebrate those individuals when we get there. Drew Tone, thank you for the Hall of Fame update. We definitely have cross-country boys and girls going to do well. They're going to Hutch this Saturday. Volleyball is sub-state here. So we have a lot of different activities, curricular, extracurricular, and then also on the academic side. The CAP data, I really do feel it will continue to, with UFly, Haggerty, and just the letters training, that we will see a turn. And Andy pointed out the timeline of uninterrupted instruction, that is gonna matter. Also, as Drew coming into the HR side, on the math side, just so you know, the state would say KSDE, Dr. Watson and so forth, say about a 1.5, not a 1 or a 2 on those CAP data, that you're gonna be successful in life, and they kind of preach that. And unfortunately, they're removing that metric of what is that gonna look like. Our CAP test our Kansas assessment test is written by KU, very rigorous, very hard. So in a lot of ways, we look very different and don't do very well on that state test, but we are having a lot of great successes. But thank you, Brandon, for the long range facility report. We're definitely addressing our needs, looking at our needs, and trying to do a value for the taxpayers, and definitely want you guys in on those decisions, and definitely transparent with every decision. So just making a lot of classroom visits with the leadership team. So a lot of great things happening at USD 457.
Okay, next board meeting. Next meeting of Board of Education will take place on November 4th at 6 p.m. here in the board meeting room, the Educational Support Center. Move on to item K, executive session.
Mr. President, I move that we go into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss personnel matter pursuant to non-elected personnel exception under COMA, to discuss an individual employee's performance, beginning at 7:55 p.m. and the open meeting will resume in the boardroom at 8:15 p.m. I'd like to invite Drew Tone to join us in executive session.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your left hand. Motion carries.